Everybody, welcome to class. This is my third live. I think I'm getting better at it, but if you're a teacher, you know your first year teaching, you learn so much. That's how I feel right now. I'm a first year teacher doing live YouTubing. One moment, I want to see if I can get this up on my other computer. See if it's actually working. Oh my gosh, it's so weird. Okay, so welcome. Come on in. If you're here, put in the chat where you're coming in from. I want to sign in to my account so I can see if y'all are putting anything in the chat. Hey, TikTok, I'm here. I'm teaching live on YouTube, and if you want to see what I'm showing, then join me on YouTube. Hey everybody, I'm getting ready to teach and answer some of your questions about why English is so weird. Why is English weird? Is there a reason for it? And that's my passion, and that's what I'm going to be talking about right now. Okay, come on in. Let's learn about English. Let's answer some questions you might have. Okay, so if you want to see what I'm sharing live on YouTube right now. So feel free to go to Laura Loves Teaching on YouTube. If not, you can listen and get a lot of information out of it as well. So let me get... Hello, everybody. Okay, I'm getting ready to show my slides. If you're on TikTok, you can listen and learn a lot. And if you want to see what I'm actually doing, you can go to YouTube or just go on YouTube later. This will be saved. Okay, so on my live so far, I've been talking about the history of English. And let me pull up the slide. So remember, English did not just fall out of the sky. Nobody just invented it and said, oh, I think I'm going to create a language. There's a long prehistory to language and how it all came about, but we're just going to be focusing on English because English tends to get a bad rap for being complicated and difficult. So my hope is to demystify it somewhat and make it make sense, because that will help you read and spell better when you understand the history of where the words come from. So when we're talking about English, remember, English comes from England. So we're talking about that little island north of Spain over there. This is where English began. And if you need a birth date for the birthday of English, it's when the Anglo-Saxon tribes came over in 450 AD and settled and took over. And remember, Angle land, that's why it says England. So last live I talked about that Anglo-Saxon layer. And just a brief reminder, the Anglo-Saxon layer are common, ordinary, everyday words that we use all the time. This is the phonics we're teaching kids in K through 2, those Anglo-Saxon words, high frequency words, weird spellings come out of there, compound words, and there is an element of Viking. And only about 20 to 30% of words come from that Anglo-Saxon layer, but it makes up almost 80% of the words we say. So it's not very many, but it's all we use, basically. And I want to be very clear. This is called the Old English layer. We don't speak in Old English, but these words came from that layer of our language. So I want to pick up next into our layer and get into what happened next after the Germanic tribes. So please remember, this has been the Anglo-Saxon Old English layer, 450 AD, but then something happened in 1066. And if you are on YouTube, you can see my slides, but if not, I'll just tell you what we're looking at. There is a big problem. And by the way, if you're on TikTok, will you hit like? I hate to say that, but it does help. Hit like, the little hearts. Anyway. Hey Tom, thank you. Keep watching. So in 1066, there was a big problem. The King of England, named King Edward, had no heir, none. And as you can imagine, people's claws came out and they're like, he has no heir. What are we to do? Well, basically entered the game of the English throne. So we have three men vying for control of the crown of England. We have Harold Godwinson, William the Conqueror, the Duke of Normandy, and Harald Hardrada, who was King of Norway. So these three gentlemen all thought they were needing to be King of England. So seriously, I mean, history's so funny. It's just like a soap opera, truly. So let me go through. So Harold Godwinson. I mean, think of that last name, Godwinson. That sounds so Old English. And so he was an English nobleman, and he thought he deserved to be King of England. Then you have William the Conqueror, who does not live in England. He is over in Normandy, northern France. And he was King Edward's cousin. So he's like, I deserve it. And then Harold Hardrada was the Viking, the King of Norway, and he thought he deserved it because there was a Viking agreement. So we have an English nobleman versus the cousin versus a Viking agreement. Who's going to win the throne? So first off, let's look at Harold Godwinson. Why does he think he deserves it? Well, he was an Anglo-Saxon nobleman. He said that King Edward made a deathbed declaration for him to be the king, the next king, on his deathbed. And after King Edward died, Harold Godwinson was actually chosen to be the king by the English nobles. So one thing about King Edward, he didn't have any children, and he was also bossed around by this Godwinson family. They were very, very powerful. Very powerful. And so Harold, now Godwinson is like, I'll be the king of England. Well, remember, there are two other people who want it. So let's look at the cousin for a minute. So this is William the Conqueror. Why does he think he deserves it? Well, William the Conqueror, cousin William, claimed that in 1051, King Edward had promised him the throne to keep it in the family and out of Godwinson's hands. I mean, so they did not like the Godwinsons. I mean, and this is 14 years before he died. And supposedly, rumor has it that Harold Godwinson had even sworn an oath to support William the Conqueror. So, he's not the Conqueror yet, but William. And so, why this happened is because King Edward grew up in Normandy and hung out with his cousin William a lot. So, that is why William wants it. So, we have cousin William and Harold Godwinson both said they were told by King Edward that they would be the next king of England. So where does this Viking guy come in? Like, why does he think he deserves it? Okay, this is where the drama happens. And Harald Hardrada, the Viking, king of Norway, he believed an old agreement between the kings of Norway and England meant Norway had a right to be taking the English throne. Another interesting thing is Harold Godwinson's, the nobleman's brother, hated Harold. And Harold's brother was named Tostig. This is not Harald the Viking. This is Harold the nobleman. Had a brother named Tostig who hated him. And Tostig basically went to Viking Harald and said, come with me. Let's go capture the throne from my brother who thinks he's the king. And so, okay, so this begins the fightings. And this all happened in 1066. I mean, 1066 was a very violent and big year. So who's going to win? Is it going to be Harold Godwinson, the English nobleman, cousin William, or Harald Hardrada, the Viking king? Okay, so first, we have that fight between Harold and Harold. Harold the Englishman, Harold the Viking. And Harold the nobleman wins. He defeats him at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. So the Viking Harold is now out of the picture. So now we're down to Harold Godwinson and cousin William. So then, at the very end of that 1066 year, in December, we have a Battle of Hastings, and Harold, who's going to win? Harold or William? Does anybody know? If you're in my TikTok or on my YouTube live, who's going to win? That's right. William the Conqueror is going to win. So cousin William. That's why he got the name William the Conqueror. And he is the Duke of Normandy. And Normandy is in northern France. So now we have a non-English person taking over the throne of England. So William the Conqueror is the new king of England. So whenever you have a new leader, things are going to change. And this is what happened in England. So in 1066, the Norman French, led by William the Conqueror, started moving over to England. And William the Conqueror is now the king of England. When you hear Normandy and the Norman French, Norman means Northman, Northmen, because they were from the north. So the Normans were actually Vikings who had come to France, and France, in an attempt to get them to stop raiding our country, just gave them that northern part. And so that's why it's called Normandy. And it has Viking roots. And these Vikings were like, this culture is pretty cool. We like it here. And so they absorbed into the French culture and language. And while they were not pure Frenchmen, they were Norman French. And so their language was a Norse-French hybrid. That's why it's called Norman French. And also they were Christian. And this is important to remember because the Anglo-Saxons originally were pagan. They were Christianized with St. Augustine and then the kings becoming Christian. But now we have a leadership who is 100% Christian. There's no pagan option with them. So just some facts about this time. Let me move my face. This ushers in what is known as Middle English. And Middle English has French now becoming the official language of the court, of the government, of education, law. Everything is in French. They start building castles. So that's why we have castles in England, not because of the Anglo-Saxons, but because of the Norman French invasion. So castles were being built. We also have feudalism now going on, where you have somebody who owns property, and then if you work for them, they will protect you and take care of you. So feudalism becomes the way to be. We also have the church, but please remember, and I said this in yesterday or the last live, Latin, pure Latin, is still going on in the church. So Latin was going on a little bit during the Anglo-Saxon time from 450 to 1066. People weren't talking it, but the monks knew it, and kings, royalty, educated people would know Latin. And so pure Latin is still there. It's the language of the church. So again, everything is switching over to French. Government is in French. Court is being run in French. Military words are French. Fashion words are French. Food words become French. Like, think of Old English cow versus French beef. So we have these synonyms going on. This ushered in more interest in art and culture and religion. So it's a very different lifestyle and than the Anglo-Saxons were having. Also, new letters started coming into our language: Q-U-G-E-I-O-N, O-I-O-Y. And those are the sounds you hear in like judge, corsage, chivalry, nation, choice. So these new sounds and letters start coming in because they're speaking French. And there we go. Also, we have two distinct classes of people now. You have the French nobles, the upper class, totally speaking French, being educated in French, very fancy and sophisticated lifestyle. But you still have the common, the peasant people, speaking English because they didn't run in the French circles. So they were living their life speaking Old English. But over time, words mashed together, and that's what happens during Middle English. But the main language, everything now is going to be written in French, Norman French. And this kind of is interesting. It's kind of like a dark hole of Old English. Like, people were still speaking in Old English, but nobody was writing in it during these few hundred years. So that's why when English emerges later, it's changed. Its sounds have changed, words have changed, and nobody had an example of how things were written down. So it was the scribes writing it down. And anyway, so that's a little bit about what was going on during that time. So one fun thing to do with kids, if you're going to talk about this, that's pretty simple, and they pretty much get it, is you have two types of words now going on. You have the common words, which reflect the Old English, common, everyday, ordinary words, versus a fancier, more sophisticated layer. And that's what the nobles and upper class were speaking, and that specifically came in after 1066. So some examples: a common word would be greetings, and a more fancy would be salutations. A common word would be mother, or a fancier word would be maternal. So you can hear the difference. So another example, in Old English, you might say help, but a fancier word would be assist. Okay, I'm going to say a common word, see if you can come up with a fancier one. If the common word is high, like that is a high mountain, what would be a fancier word for saying high? If you're in TikTok. I don't know if anybody's in YouTube, but if you're in TikTok, what's a fancier way of saying high? Not high, but high up. All right, you might be thinking elevated. Okay, what might be a fancier or more sophisticated word for father? Yep, Paternal. So you can see we have common words like buy, I'm going to buy a cow, versus purchase. I'm going to purchase a cow. Oh, good, Tom. Yeah, patriarch. Yeah, there's that patra, paternal, patriarch. Yes, excellent. So you can see the difference between the common versus the fancy, and we can attribute it all to the invasion of 1066. So what does this mean language-wise? So again, if you were on YouTube, you can see this, but our Latin layer are more sophisticated scholarly words that you're going to see across all texts, like beneficial, vociferous, meticulous, vivacious, proclivity. Okay, these are more sophisticated words. Because they are more sophisticated, they're multisyllabic. So instead of saying like dad, you have paternal. Or instead of saying high, like the high mountain, you have elevated. So you can see there's more syllables or beats in the words. Also, schwa, the sound of schwa is going to come up because of the nature of multisyllabic words. So in a word like special, we don't say spécial, we say special. And that A is having the sound, the schwa sound, special. Or in a word like definition, we don't say definition, definition. So multisyllabic words will have that unaccented sound called schwa, which makes a really quick short U or a short I sound. Also, one fascinating thing with Latin, the Latin layer of our words, is what I call sticky I and sticky U. And this is when you have like nation, you don't say nation, nation, or vision, you don't say vision, or gracious, you don't say gracious. So when a consonant has that I after it, it makes a y sound, nation, and it makes that sh sound. It's called palatalization, and it just affects how you say it. Totally in the Latin layer. That is not Anglo-Saxon at all. So you know you're in those fancier words. Also, sticky U is kind of the same idea. So if you have a word like nature, you don't go nature, nature. Or in a word like gradual, you don't say gradual. And so that U, when it's following a consonant, will get nature, gradual. So it's the same. Mouth gymnastics is going on. Also, we have another round of silent letters. So you have words like debt, D-E-B-T, which is obviously not Anglo-Saxon. That doesn't even sound Anglo-Saxon. And the B is thrown in to show you its connection to debitum, a debitum, a Latin word. And same with doubt, that B connects back to the original Latin word. And in salmon, salmon, it connects back to the Latin word. And a lot of times these silent letters were added in later, like in the 1600s, the 16th century and the 1500s, to show how words are connected to Latin. So they seem more fancy. And then for morphology, when we're studying the meaningful parts of words, linguists call this the Latin layer, and this is where you get into the Latin bases. It's all about the base, and a Latin base cannot stand by itself. It needs affixes. So if you had the Latin base rupt, I would never come up to you and say, oh, I'm going to rupt that balloon, burst it. You would say like erupt or eruption or interrupt. Or another Latin base is struct, meaning to build. I would never come up to you and say, hey, let's go struct some Legos. I would say, let's construct some Legos. Let's make a construction site. So that's an easy way to know about Latin bases in morphology. So that's just an overview. So my question now is, what percentage of words do you think in our language right now come from that Latin French layer of our language? If you're on TikTok. I have 4 faithful people in here right now. Thank you. Please like and follow. Make sure you're liking so I get credit on TikTok. Okay, Tom, you said 70. That's a good guess. It's actually about 55%. You're right, 55 to 60% of our words come out of that layer. So during that time of 1066, thousands, I think they say around 10,000 words came into our language during that time, and we still use about 75% of them. It's really, it changed our language forever changed English. So if you're looking at our layer cake of history, I have it on YouTube, but I'll show you here. It might be backwards to you. I don't know how to make it not be backwards, but so we're up in this area, the French and Latin area right here. And so this is what is known as Middle English. So you have Old English down here. That's when the Germanic tribes came over. And then in 1066, the Norman French came in. And so that's Middle English. This is now forever going to be changed because of this. But what's nice, kind of a lucky thing about it, is we now have so many synonyms. We have so many words in English because of the invasion of 1066 and ushering in all these new words. I get people ask me a lot, Laura, can I, use the cake? I mean, for what age do I need to start talking about, the history of English? And I say just as soon as they're born, because for young learners, like when I said with Anglo-Saxon yesterday, you're just talking about how, look at these, words, these simple words that came from these old Germanic tribes. They just looked around them at the world and said chair and wall and bed. And that's the Anglo-Saxon layer. So you've already hopefully been talking about that. And it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to go in deep history with them, but just making them aware like, oh yeah, that is kind of a simple everyday word. And then when you get into the Middle English time, just talk about, whoo, that's a fancier sounding word. Woo, and that's it. Just make that comparison. Simple word versus fancy, and making them aware of that. And then as kids get older, they enjoy, some more than others, but they enjoy, understanding where words come from, because it makes everything make sense. And then when you're teaching, you have something to anchor your discussion to. Remember the Latin layer, or when you're researching, it can totally help kids make it make more sense. So yes, you can talk about this with young learners, but also now when you were looking in a dictionary, dictionaries flat out tell you where words come from. And I remember being little, not understanding like MEOELG, like what does all this mean? And now I see it. So on my screen, I have a dictionary entry for the word law. And right there next to it, it says ME. Middle English. And now I know exactly what that means, and my brain immediately connects it to this 1066 part of the cake. So it's just so helpful when you are aware of what all that means. And then the other example is debit that I mentioned earlier, that B in debt. And here on the screen, I don't know if I can show y'all. Well, anyway, it says debitum, and it has an L beside it for Latin. And again, when you're looking in a dictionary, even if it's online, my brain immediately visualizes the Latin layer, and I know right where it fits. So that is my lesson for today about the layer of our language once 1066 hit. And the next time I talk about this, I'll go into what happens next, because right now I'm going to leave it with, we have French king on the English throne, bringing in French, which is Latin based. And that's the dominant language in England now. So again, if you've ever thought English was weird and crazy, yeah, but that's because it's got a wild and crazy history. So thank you for being here today. If you have any questions that you want to talk about, English with Charisse, is it a silent letter or a glottal stop? I don't say it debt. I don't hear the B. Debt. I don't know. B is not, I don't know. I would say it's a silent letter because they added it back in the 1500s. That's a great question. Okay, I'm new to all this live business. Were there any Latin words in Old English?
I could play them, but I just can't recognize like the fingering to the nose right now because I haven't really tried.
Maybe through the church. But the Germanic tribes were speaking Old English, like their Germanic language, which we now call Anglo-Saxon. Mm-hmm. I'd have to look at that. I mean, I don't want to say no. I mean, and I'll be honest, I know a fair amount, but I don't know everything. And I will definitely let y'all know if I'm not sure, but I can look that up. Let's see if there's any other questions that I didn't see. I don't think so. Any other questions? You can type it now, and if not, I will hop on live again. I enjoy it. Please make sure you like that heart because TikTok notices that, and that's a good thing, I suppose. Also, if you do have questions, you can grab the link in my bio. There's my Linktree link, and you can email me a question. And I'm going to start doing more live so we can talk about our language and make it make sense, because it helps all of us. I mean, it helps teachers, of course, but all of us, if you're like me, grew up, nobody explained any of this. And I thought phonics was weird. Spelling didn't make any sense. And honestly, it all does. And I'd never even heard of morphology. And the thing I'm learning is you can't really understand it until you understand the history of English. That's my opinion. And I find it fascinating. So thank you for being here. TikTokers, thank you, Tom. Sent a gift. And somebody else, thank you. I really appreciate that. I don't quite know what that means, but I thank you for that. You're welcome, Tom. You guys have a great evening, and I'll see you next time I go live. And I never know how to turn it off, so bear with me while I punch some buttons. And YouTube, I'm going to go ahead and stop now, but YouTube, thank you.